Welcome back to the Skid Factory. We've just finished a build on our 1974 HJ Kingswood station wagon. We bucked the trend though. We didn't fit an LS engine. We fitted a genuine Holden V8 to it, which is a bit of a love for Australian Holden fanatics. We rebuilt the engine, we strengthened it up, put a nice cam in it, filled it up with some nice valve train parts, checked all the clearances and bolted it all together. We slipped it into the engine bay, bolted straight in with some tough mounts, bolted up a Turbo 700 from Hughes to the back of it, did a custom diff out of a Borg-Warner Falcon diff with a Harrop center in it, put some new brakes on it from Hopper Stoppers. It's all pretty good. I've been cruising around in it over Christmas. Sounds great, got a bit of whomp, cruises nice, gets good fuel economy surprisingly. And that may be due to the fact that it's pretty underpowered. Even though it made 280 horsepower on the Hoff's dyno, it doesn't really reflect it when you're driving it. It's not quite what we were after. So, fortunately, we were tight asses and we didn't put high compression pistons in it, so it's running 8.6 to 1 compression. Perfect for boost, as they say. So, let's boost it. As you know, they don't call me Turbo Yoda for nothing. Catch is, I didn't name myself Turbo Yoda, so this time we're going to fit this bad boy. Before we start fapping over this beautifully engineered supercharger kit, how about we fap over this beautifully engineered Kingswood shirt, which you can buy from our merch store, www.theskidfactory.com. Limited edition, so if you're a Kingswood fanatic, get in there and pick one up ASAP. This is a Harrop FDFI2300 Supercharger. It is designed to bolt onto the Iron Lion. Harrop is an Australian performance company. It was founded in 1955 by Len Harrop, who's the great-grandfather of the current managing director of the company. Ron Harrop was probably the guy that sort of forged the company into a performance vehicle manufacturer, very well-known brand in Australia, and they are an Eaton dealer, so they take American-made Eaton rotating groups like the supercharger assemblies and then make their own sort of castings and stuff to allow them to be bolted onto whatever engine. And there's a ton of engines that you can bolt these things onto. I think they've got LSA Camaro they do an upgrade for because they're only a 1900. You can get either a 2300 or a 2650, which is one bigger than this. We've got Mustangs, BMW M3, Ford Boss engines, which are only in Australia. It's like a homemade Triton engine with the 4-valve heads on it that aren't really that good, but I'm sure they're a lot better with a supercharger on them. Every Commodore that has an LS in it, which is lots of them. 2GR Toyota V6s in Lotuses. Minis, R53 Mini, they do an upgrade for. Y62, Nissan Patrol or Armada or QX80 in America. That would be an exciting one to throw on. I'm sure they're a pretty powerful thing as standard. I'm sure it's much better with a big charger on it. Toyota 86, they do a real nice kit for that. Skion FRS, whatever, Subaru. I forgot about Subaru. They probably should have mentioned them first since it was their car. 200 series and UR V8s like the 5.7 litre version, and also the American vehicles that have those fitted. And of course the Iron Lion. So we're mainly interested in the Iron Lion at the moment because it's our thing. These things have gone through a bit of a progression over the years. You'll notice this FDFI, that stands for front drive front intake. Basically it means that the supercharger is not only being driven from the front, it's also intaking air from the front. It's a relatively new thing. Previously, this supercharger would have been on backwards, and it would have been driven from the rear. And the intake would have been out the back. That's the traditional way of doing it. After that, they started looking at ways of bringing the intake in from the front, because you can have clearance problems with firewalls and that sort of thing. So the next sort of generation of engineering was to run like a jack shaft through the back with a small belt at the back that would then drive from the rear and leave the front open to have the intake. To get rid of that jack shaft idea was a little bit complex. They've gone with this FDFI, and these snouts and drive assemblies come in various different shapes depending on the application. You can get this kit for a Holden V8 in either that application, which suits the original sort of airbox in a lot of the Commodores that had this engine fitted to them, or you can get it with the LS style intake that comes out the side here and faces forward. Either one will work. It just depends on your application and what vehicle and what base engine you started with. They don't do like a full kit for this to suit vehicles, because the 308 or the 304 or the 5 litre was fitted to so many different vehicles over 30 something years that it was made, that it's not practical to make a very specific kit for each vehicle. So they sell it with options of snouts and also options of the drive assembly, big billet brackets and stuff that drive the charger and adapt to the alternator and whatever pulley drive system you've got. We've got a VT drive system because that's what our base engine is, and it's got a whole bunch of adapters to suit that. Intercooler wise, it's got, Harrop calls it a brick, so it's a big mesh, sort of a core inside this billet assembly here. Very high efficiency water to air intercooler setup. It's got a single intake and 2 outlets, and that has a pump and a radiator and all that sort of stuff. We'll look at that when we start fitting it to the car, which I reckon is probably about time. I'm sick of talking about it. I want to get it on there, and I want to hear this bad boy howling.
You forgot to tell them about the episode we already did on the supercharging.
Oh yeah, we already did an episode about superchargers, and Harrop was kind enough to send us a cutaway and some other rotating assemblies and that sort of thing, so we could show you how they work. And we also compared them to a centrifugal and turbocharger, just to have a bit of a comparison's sake. And we also said some controversial things about shiny blowers on top of engines and them not working very well. So if you want to get yelly about your uncle's big block with a methanol blower on it, get over and have a look at that episode and destroy the comment section with profanity. Now it might make sense why this is such a dodgy intake pipe. I wasn't investing too much in it when we knew something was going to happen. Got the bunch of bananas off. We've cleaned up the intake area and the valley bridges and ready for the blower to go on. We thought we'd just throw them next to each other to give you a bit of an idea of the height differences between them. That's always a concern when you're doing a supercharger setup, is bonnet height, bonnet clearance. It's not as bad as you'd think. It's only a little bit over an inch around about this point near the bridge. But that doesn't always tell the story because we've obviously got a lot more, it extends out a lot further towards the front. So I'm hoping that we won't have to cut into the bonnet skin itself, maybe just into a little bit of clearance into the support, because I don't think the old wagon needs a reverse cowl or anything like that. It's not really its style, but we'll see what happens. Won't be long till it goes on there and we'll find out. We might try and shut the bonnet soon after it's bolted on. Before we throw it on, we will fit up all the drive system onto the front of the engine, and also just show you the rest of the kit. This is the main bracket that sort of houses, it replaces the alternator bracket. It fits onto the cylinder head like that from memory. That's your alternator there. That's pretty much the same sort of way that the original bracket works on the VT engine. This is different to other engines. There is other versions of this for the other Holden V8s that may not be the same as this, that have different alternator mounting systems, but that's the one we're using because we've got the VT engine. So this is sort of your drive setup there. It's got 8 PK drive, so pretty heavy duty. These blowers can make a lot of power. It's probably going to be fairly underused in our application, but they have, Harrop has actually got a video up on their channel, Harrop TV, that has got one of these on a sort of fairly well-built 355 cube engine, and it makes 600 kilowatts or 800 horsepower on an engine dyno. So there's obviously there's a lot of airflow through that, which requires a lot of drive. So that's why it's got such a big belt on it. It's got these custom, that replaces your front pulley. When we pull the other one off, we'll see that they've used some unused space on the original pulley setup to add the 2 extra ribs. That's some spaces. I'm assuming that's spacing that out, but I don't know yet. Watered air intercooler system. This is the radiator for the watered air intercooler. I think this is for a Commodore. Obviously they don't make anything for a Kingswood itself, but got no problems adapting that up to what we need. It's sized correctly for that particular intercooler brick. Got a big Bosch circulation pump, and that is the header tank. So after the coolant's been through the intercooler brick, it comes out in 2 lines and into here, and then that goes down to the intercooler radiator. So just a big circulation system. Watered air intercoolers work excellent if you set them up right and if they're sized right. You've got to use a very large radiator if you've got a very large intercooler, particularly on something like a blower or a turbo diesel where it's pumping air under boost all the time. Less so on a street car with a fairly large turbo that's probably going to be in vacuum 90% of the time anyway. So in this application and in turbo diesel applications, the size of this is very important. It needs to be big, otherwise you'll just boil the coolant. We got the injectors in. I swapped them over. That fits no worries at all. I have fiddled around with this. I've changed this from the back to the front to suit our application, and we put a couple of new AN fittings in there to suit the fuel lines. They sort of all just line up. So let's go rip the front of the engine off and start fitting up this gear. We've got that big whiny Harrop bolted up, fitted perfectly as you'd expect from a precision engineered bit of gear. It's pretty heavy, that's about the only whinge, and this engine bay is quite wide, but we got there. We pre-fitted it and did some bonnet clearance checks and just trimmed the bonnet frame to fit. So it does fit under the bonnet, and we're pretty stoked about that because we didn't really want to change the look of the car too much. So it's pretty good for a big huffer like that with an intercooler jammed in between it to be able to fit pretty much where the original manifold came off.
Looks nice, that goes well.
I suspect that the most difficult part of this is going to be getting the throttle linkages sorted out, being that we've got a different throttle body on it already, and all these manifolds are machined for a GM type throttle body, like a drive-by-wire 4-bolt, which you can then swap out for a aftermarket 4-bolt cable throttle if you want. But we're using the Mustang throttle body because that suits the ECU that we've got. So I've already made a little adapter plate for it. That was pretty straightforward. But sorting out the throttle brackets is going to be a bit of a fiddle. So I'll definitely look forward to that. Right now I'm just doing a very minor wiring change. The only difference that we've got to do is the fact that the air temperature sensor is actually in underneath the intercooler on this, where it should be. That way we're going to read correct air density after the compression's done and the cooling's done. So I've just pulled the wiring back through and routed it out another junction point, and I'm just changing the connector because it's got a different type of air temperature sensor, just a normal GM one. So I'm just going to re-terminate that and wrap up the join. The only other wiring we've got to do is just for the pump, and I'll probably put a relay inside the fuse box for that. We've got some spare spots in there, and just run a separate wire for it. I don't know which side it's going to go on yet. We've got to mount our radiator out the front there and figure it out from there. So pretty happy with the few hours work that we've done. It's pretty straightforward, and there's actually a lot more room behind it than the old banana manifold. So well done, Harrop, for making people with Commodores' lives easier when they want to change their dizzy cap. It's good enough reason to buy one, I reckon. Trap for young players with these older GM connectors is they're pull to seat, so you've actually got to thread the wire through the connector, then make the termination, then pull it back into seat. Not a very good idea, basically.
Why not? Well,
Because
it's obvious, actually.
You can't move pins around if you need to. If you do it wrong, you can't change it. You've got to cut it off and buy more pins or buy another connector.
What if you get the polarity wrong?
Yeah, well, not on this. There's no polarity difficulties, but you know, that's a story for another day. We need a few little bits and pieces, just some vacuum fittings and stuff like that to adapt to our Kinger. And we'll get stuck into throttle bodies and intercooling bits tomorrow. In the meantime, hopefully that valley bridge goop seals up nicely, because those things are bad for leaking. We did our very, very best to get that sucker in there right, so hopefully it'll be all good. Old engine life.
At least the rope seal's not leaking.
No, it's not, eh? I'm amazed. Touch wood.
Looks good, Al. Great job.
See you back here tomorrow with some fittings and stuff, eh?
Yep, I got my list.
When we left off yesterday, I mentioned that the throttle cable and kickdown was probably going to be a bit of a pain in the arse, and I wasn't wrong. Been doing a bit of brainstorming and staring at it yesterday afternoon, last night, and this morning I had a bit of a go at trying to figure out how to do it. There's multiple difficulties with it, just part of it due to the throttle body design itself, the way it pulls the throttle open is kind of around the wrong way, so had to fiddle around with the linkage, the quadrant setup, and also the orientation of the throttle. You can put it it's square, so you can put it wherever you like, except for the bonnet and the supercharger and the engine and all those things getting in the way. So we've rotated it around. This is the adapter plate I made. That was just made out of a piece of 10mm plate and a hole saw, but just bolts on over the, that's just a GM drive-by-wire layout. And that goes on there. We've now got the quadrant down the bottom. That was just because that's the only place I can have it without it interfering with belts and bonnets and all sorts of other things that are in the way. So I've gone through and made a bracket for it. It's almost made. So it just mounts from the throttle body bolt holes, basically 2 right angles, anchor point for the cables. Thing with stuff like this is it does have to remain reasonably stiff, even though it's only made out of like 1.6mm steel. You can make that into quite a strong thing with if you use a couple of simple techniques. One of them is, I'll show you. When you've got a right hand bend, or doesn't even have to be right angle, that's a fatigue point if it's getting pulled and pushed all the time by the throttle operation. So the way around this, and this is very common if you actually have a look at any bracket made for any car, you'll see this technique used. What it is we do a counter punch into the angle, and all I've done is just cut a couple of little grooves in the soft jaws here, slip this in there. I've blunted off a chisel and just banged it in, so that counters the direction of the bend, and that actually stops it from fatiguing. It's a pretty simple thing to do. As I said, have a look at any bracket on a car made out of sheet metal and you'll probably find that they've used that technique for the same reason. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to cut a hole in the middle of it and then dimple dye it. And we can do that now because I got some dimple dyes for Christmas. We've got this dimple dye kit from Rogue Fab, which is in the United States, up north. I don't remember which state it is. It's near Washington. Sorry, guys. They basically give you there's a whole bunch of them. They have these little bands around them, which helps you to easily identify which one's which. So that's 1 inch. And they do, so if it's 3 inches, it's got 3 of those. If it's 3 1/4, it's got three cuts and another smaller cut, which is 1/4 of an inch. These are pretty simple stuff. All you do is cut a hole in the middle of it. I've just used a step drill for that. Goes through the center. It's basically male and female dye. You can either put a bolt through that and tighten it up. You can use a hydraulic punch type mobile unit if you're sort of working in the car, or you can just use a standard press, which we got this off Oldcock because he's got more presses than he knows what to do with. So I'm just going to use that. Thing you have to be aware of with this is I've got 2 cables that are stretching through here, so I don't want to press the dimple outwards because it might rub on the cables, so we'll go the other way.
How do you know which way the dimple goes? Oh, because it's the male, female.
Because of the...
Oh, yeah.
It's the first time I've used these, so hopefully it... Ooh, look at that. How good a dimple dies. So that's put strength into the flat part of that. So
I think that's one thing to notice, that it's not just for looks, it's for strength.
No, that's not what it's for at all. It's to strengthen the metal. So excellent bits of gear. You can see I've butchered the crap out of this thing. It's been flipped upside down. I've cut things off it, added extra bits. It's been a epic pain in the butt, and right now I so wished I had e-throttle and you wouldn't have to worry about any of this. However, e-throttle ECU does cost more, of course, but also because it's got a kick-down cable, that creates its own problems with the e-throttle because something's got to pull that kick-down cable. But generally speaking, I would have e-throttle on there if it was my choice. But this will also work. How does work?
Instructions? You're too lazy to look them up, aren't you?
Yeah. Hoff can gap the plugs later, I reckon.
Hey?
The Hoff can gap the plugs later.
I know what's going to happen. I'm going to be the one pulling them out when they're hot.
We got stuck right into mounting up the watered air intercooler radiator. It's just hanging out the front here. We've just sort of adapted it to mount off the bonnet latch and another bracket down the bottom there. There's also the pump. That's just has a supplied bracket that we just bolted on. So that's feeding the coolant out of the bottom of that radiator, which then pumps it into the intercooler core underneath the supercharger. So inlet manifold, intercooler, then supercharger. So the supercharger is compressing the air. Compress air, it creates heat. Doesn't matter how good your compressor is, it still will create heat. The intercooler is the icing on the cake to take that heat away. Although they are quite a good efficient supercharger. The twisted vane Eatons are pretty good, like a billion times better than the old Roots stuff. They still require an intercooler, just like a turbo does. So that does the job. That's a very efficient sort of watered air thing there. After that's absorbed the heat created by the supercharger, the coolant then comes out into this bottle. So it just expels into that. That gets rid of any air pockets and stuff that usually you'll have something like this. However it's laid out. There are different ways to lay out the plumbing. This is obviously a good way of doing it if Harrop's doing it that way. It then feeds down back into the radiator. So this thing's job is to act as a filler and also to get any air pockets out of it. There are other ways of doing it. On my Toyota 86 Turbo kit, this isn't how I've laid mine out. And it all comes down to how the intercooler sits, whether it's upright, sideways, flat like that, how it's designed, and how prone it is to getting air trapped in it. If there's air in it, it won't work. Air doesn't cool anything in that application. It's got to be coolant and air on the other side. So this is a very simple way of doing it. These sort of intercoolers work really well, but only if you match them to the correct radiator and only if you pump the water at the right speed and if the radiator's got good airflow to it. There's a lot of only ifs, so it's not as simple as just slapping it together. If you do it wrong, it won't work. It'll just get hot and stay hot and the intercooler may as well not be there. So we're ready to slap a radiator back in it and maybe fire it up and see if it makes hell whiny noises.
You forgot to remind the people about the other videos, Alan.
What videos? Oh, the ones, oh yeah, we did a video about, tech video about heat exchangers, which all these things are.
No scripts here.
I need palm cards, bro. Even if I had them, I wouldn't look at them. Good to go?
Yeah. zings.
If that supercharger was polished and terribly inefficient, we'd be ready to get out on the burnout pad.
That does sound so sick. Have you called Wendy yet to book in the tune?
I will.
Jake will probably answer.
Thank you for calling. Your call will be answered.
Hello, Clean Exhaust.
Yeah, is that Wendy?
yeah, it is.
I'd like to book in for one of the Hoff's finest calibrations, please.
Yeah, when? You want Friday, don't you?
I do.
Do you want the good news or the bad news?
I want only good news.
Only good news. I think I've run out of good news. No, it's alright. We've already booked you in anyway.
Sweet.
And that's how good of an office lady I am.
You are.
In there.
Good legs too,
Yeah,
bro.
Skid Factory Steel Tiger tune.
Steel Tiger?
Steel Tiger tune.
It's the
CHOON
The
tune.
Zing Tiger.
what is it?
Is it a squealing cat now?
The
Going
squealing,
quiet,
yeah, it's got
squealy.
the cat stuck in a fan belt tiger. Steel Tiger. I'm sure you'll think of something in the meantime anyway.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll come up with something. Yeah, that's who I've already booked it in, mate, so Jake's got a couple of jobs on, but what time are you guys getting here? Early?
8 o'clock.
Hey, eek.
All right.
Alright, I'll see you then.
Thanks, Wendy. She's a good egg.
My man.
Lemon squash.
Do it. Promote them.
You know you can buy these at our store
Where do I find the store?
on the internet.
Oh.
www.theinternet.theskidfactory.com.
Thanks, bro.
We just got to get some red GM coolant because that's what Harrop specifically requests for their intercooler system. So we'll grab some of that. And
And it's also good to use different coloured coolant.
it's a good idea to use different colour coolant because then you can tell which one's leaking. However, you've still got to comply with whatever your engine requires. But yeah, it isn't a bad idea to use red and green, just so you know. But none of it should leak anyway because it's all brand new.
Unless I stuff something up. What are you doing, Chooch?
Just waiting for Wendy so we can get the iron line on the dyno.
What are you reading? Street Machine. What's this?
I'm just flicking through an old Zoom mag.
Is that the Hoff's car?
Yeah. Look at this chooch.
Who's that?
Some chooch.
Old Hodjo.
Looks a lot less stressed there.
Sick.
Off doing wheelies and shit. Oh, look at that piece of shit.
Familiar. That's not too bad. That shed looks pretty familiar. There's grass there.
There's no house next door. Look at that Ranger kid.
AM Auto Services.
I wonder if that dude ever finished that.
No, I don't think he did. Maybe that's more motivation for you.
Sorry, mate, no trouble allowed.
Hey, mate. Where's Wendy? She's not.
She's off getting her legs shaved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rightio. Are we good?
She needs it.
Good set of pins, though.
Oh, yeah.
Are we good to get the car into the dyno? Get the KE out of the way and roll the. Well, you come up with a name for it yet?
The KE? For the Kingswood?
Yeah.
I don't know, like supercharged. The wine and liner.
The whining lion.
The wine
Winding
and liner.
lion.
No, you've got to move that thing out of the way and get on there.
Sweet. you think, mate?
Looks good. It's got an intercooler. Happy about that.
Yeah.
This is a bit more fancy than a milk bottle.
That's WB Statesman. Kingswood guys, if you want an actual bottle that actually works.
That was Resto country too, wasn't it?
Yeah. Good
It's
thing.
got a heat exchanger out the front there and a pump.
Yeah.
Is the ECU controlling the pump or is this on
Just ignition.
Yep. They're not a bad looking kit, eh? Pretty sturdy. What brand's that? Harrop.
Harrop.
Oh, yeah. Alright, we'll hook some stuff up to it and see what boost it makes.
Sweet.
What pulleys are on it? Don't know. Alright. Maybe we should buzz around and check what else is happening, eh?
So talk us through what you're doing, Hoff.
Well, it's probably wise just to revisit some of these cruise live load side parts of the map now because it's got a bit more air available to the engine. So I'm just making sure that they're all still, you know, close to my target air fuel ratio. So we'll start with the timing, pretty conservative, like it's got stuff falling down here, just so we can figure out if it's going to make heaps of boost or not. About 9 PSI or something.
Yeah. Pretty sure Broadsby's 10.
That'd be better. It's quite a difference, eh?
So far, yeah.
Down low, like right down low, it's heat to an hour.
There's your 400. So that was just their fuel ratio that made the difference there.
I reckon we're pretty much done there. I'm pretty happy with 430 horsepower at the wheels. That is quite a good number for a old iron line, plastic kitty.
Whining line.
Whining line. I think the big story here is not just the power increase, but the difference in the torque curve. And that's very impressive. I've never been a massive fan of superchargers, as people would probably guess. But in this application where it's been correctly designed and engineered by people that know what they're doing and has an intercooler underneath it, it is some seriously impressive numbers. I'll get the Hoff to run through the graphs. I know how much nerds like to look at dyno graphs.
Alright, so I didn't have a RPM pickup on it the first time you guys brought it in. I didn't have one on now. What that means is I can't give you an estimated flywheel torque figure, but I can give you an axle torque figure at the hub. So when it came in aspirated, you know, as you rolled into it, it flat out made 700 foot-pound of axle torque. It now makes more than double that on the roll-on. So
So everything else has stayed the same though,
Yeah,
so that's still a good indication of...
and it now holds torque for a hell of a long time too. It's still way up there at peak power, so works very well.
And the power curve is just a result of the torque curve, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very, very linear.
Yeah. So on the street, this is probably...
That's where you're going to feel it.
Yeah.
As soon as you get on the throttle, it's going to be night and day difference. So the obvious thing is, obviously when it's on boost, you've got less timing. So it's probably, I think total timing at 6,000, then at 9 pounds of boost is about 19 degrees, where we're at about 28, 29 degrees aspirated. Obviously the fueling aspirated was about 12.7, 12.8 to 1.
Yep.
Now we're trying to target about 11.9. It's pretty much flat, it's perfect.
Sweet. Injector duty, I think last time you said you were using like under half?
Yeah, well, I think I saw numbers over 70, I'll just have a look.
So the Hoff's got both the tuning program and data logging program running, and he's skipping back between the two to analyse the data, look at the dyno data, and use that to decide on changes to the fuel map and the ignition map.
So 73.7% injector duty. So it used more than half more than what it was before.
I'm sure it was only like 45% before.
Does that mean there's room for more power now?
You can make more, he's got to change pulley.
Okay.
More boost. We're not making more.
And then that's when you like throw a rod or something?
The plastic kitty is not...
Something will happen.
Plastic kitty was not built for this.
Yeah, 6,000 RPM, that's a lot for this old thing, is it not?
Well, traditionally they'd be dead at $5,000 because...
That's the other thing that's happened. Like, previously by 5,500 it was done and dusted.
And now it's happy to keep going. So you're actually pulling out of it before it's even...
I reckon it'll make power to 7,000.
Unless the crank breaks
unless
enough
something
or the
falls
rod
out
goes
of it.
out block.
What are these common for braking though?
Everything.
Oh.
No, probably just rods, pistons, crank, just the important stuff that the whole engine.
No biggie.
All right.
What do you reckon? Go for a
Go and take it for a drive and see what it does.
Sweet. Skid now.
Watch out for that scrap metal bin too. You'll have to call Wendy to get the mop, mate. We took the Hoff for a drive, and was he impressed? Do you reckon he was impressed?
It's pretty hard to impress the Hoff because he's got like a 1,500 horsepower 2JZ. But he did say that feels like 300, 400 rear wheel. So I'm guessing that's the tick of approval.
Yeah. It is good. The drivability of this car has totally changed, and it's awesome.
Yeah, that's the biggest change, is it's just instantaneous torque.
Straight off the jandle. Straight off the tip of your jandle. I love saying that word now. It's my favourite.
Tip it in, boys.
I thought it was a Tesla, your favourite cars, Alan.
No.
And it just keeps pulling too. It doesn't stop.
It's still pretty linear.
You should slow down and do another hit. You can't hear the
This
whine.
car doesn't feel as safe anymore.
You can't hear the whine from here, but I know
When you're on the outside,
on the outside of the car, all you hear is just whoop coming towards you. So sick.
The whining lion.
So we just sent our good friend Martin a photo of the dyno graph, and he asked a good question and said, how does it compare to a turbo? And reality is that I reckon this works way better. We've never really done any supercharge. We haven't done any supercharge stuff before.
Nothing that I've done fiddled around with like chrome blowers and shit that don't work, but nothing quality like this.
And reality is,
The dyno graph, you look at that torque and that's what you feel when you're driving it.
yeah,
Just so different to drive. A turbo would make the same power, but you wouldn't get that instantaneous throttle response.
and this is the kind of car you can just drive all day long, hey? Hot laps for days.
We could if we weren't about to run out of fuel. Might have to go to the servo.
Probably worth noting too that this car is going to be, Scott's going to keep his thing for the rest of his life, and he's going to hand it down onto his son. The body has got a little bit of rust in it, but it's not bad. It needs a resto, which is, it'll get done one day. One of those things, cars are expensive.
Especially painting cars.
Yeah, painting's expensive. I wish I knew a panel beater.
You mean you wish you knew a panel beater that would work for free?
Well, true that. Maybe we can do like a trade swap.
What?
Are we going to go down to Hastings Street for a hot lap now?
I think we'll go get some fuel and take her home, have a lemon squash and hand the keys over.
Yeah, roger that. Scott going to come pick it up?
We need to get some fuel because Scott will run out if we don't. Again.
Don't stuff it up, Scott. That's the one thing that this thing needs is a fuel gauge, yeah?
It's got a fuel gauge, it's just wrong.
Okay. Is it backwards or something? No, it's not
No,
backwards.
it's just wrong.
Wasn't there a comment someone noted that?
Yeah, I got a link to what to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Just haven't got around to it yet. Been too busy bolting on blowers. Well, that's one Kingswood done and dusted. I've still got a couple more in the car park though, so don't never fear. We'll get to them.
One day. 430 horsepower. Pretty
And
stout.
lots of torques, and that's the big thing. All the torques.
Huge thanks to all the companies that have been involved with this build. I've had a heap of help, and we wouldn't have been able to do it without you guys. So thanks for everyone that's coming on board. Thanks to Scott for letting us do it in the first place, mate. This is your car, and I'm looking forward to going for a cruise in it with you and your young fella one day. But the Kingswood's done. We've still got more Holdens coming up, and it's pretty obvious what is coming up because it's been in the background this whole time. Mars is getting a bit of a treat, a bit of a makeover, so looking after that. We've got some clues on our social media. Again, some good companies on board for that vehicle too. What else do we need to tell the people, Alan?
Like, subscribe, hit the bell.
YouTube. Patreon.
Not my idea. It's YouTube's idea.
www.theskidfactory.com for shirts, stubby coolers. We love what we do, and
tags, all that stuff.
I hope you guys love what we do too, because we enjoy it. Onwards and upwards, Alan.
Bring on 2020, bro.
It's 2020 already.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What day is it?
I don't know, man.
I need a holiday.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.
Cheers. Is that a good intro?
Yeah, that worked all right. You like it?
All right.
You planned that one overnight, didn't you?
No. Straight out.
Supercharged Yoda.
You know how chatty I am.
Blowing Yoda. That sounds a bit weird. Blower Yoda? Yoda blower.
Boosted Yoda. Higher than atmospheric pressure Yoda.